Have you ever stopped to think about why you keep making the same mistakes repeatedly? Don't worry, this is not a sign of failure or lack of intelligence. In fact, the answer is closer than you think and has everything to do with how you see situations and react to them. Stoic philosophy teaches us something powerful. The problem is not in the outside world but within ourselves. Yes, it may sound harsh, but it is liberating when understood correctly. Imagine yourself walking through a dark forest, surrounded by branches and roots that seem to appear out of nowhere. You stumble, fall, get up, and move forward. However, something curious happens. You stumble again on the exact same route. Why? The answer is simple but profound. Your mind is distracted. You are so focused on the pain from the previous fall, or the frustration of not moving forward that you repeat the same pattern without reflecting on what caused it. This vicious cycle of errors is fueled by a lack of attention to our daily decisions. The Stoics warn us that the repetition of mistakes is not due to bad luck or misfortune, but our inability to look inside and take responsibility for our choices. When we are not aware of what we are doing, we are doomed to stumble repeatedly over the same stones. But here's the good news. Breaking this cycle starts with a single step: identifying the invisible traps that bind us. These traps are not always visible. They often hide behind our own prejudices, fears, or unquestioned expectations. The first step to changing this is to practice constant reflection. Ask yourself before making any important decision: am I repeating the same old pattern or really choosing something different? By doing this frequently, you will start to detect these traps before they make you fall again. In summary, the answer to the question, why do I keep making the same mistakes, is not in the outside world but within you, in how you think, decide, and act. Break free from unconscious repetition and start seeing the stones in your path. Only then will you be able to truly move forward. As a Stoic proverb aptly says, the greatest obstacle to finding solutions is the blindness caused by repeating the same mistakes. So, are you ready to take the next step towards transformation? Let's explore now how your bad decisions may be a reflection of automatic patterns you don't even realize you are repeating. Imagine for a moment that you are in a dark room surrounded by shadows that seem to move around you. You feel fear, uncertainty, and even without seeing clearly, you begin to react impulsively, trying to escape these invisible figures. Now stop and think, are these shadows real, or are they creations of your mind? Most of the time, the real obstacles we face are not in the outside world but within ourselves. Our emotions, limiting beliefs, and automatic thought patterns can be our worst enemies, especially when we repeat the same mistakes without realizing it. The Stoics, great masters of ancient philosophy, had a powerful view on this. It is not circumstances that define us but how we choose to react to them. If you find yourself constantly stumbling over the same stones, perhaps it is time to look inside and identify the ghosts that are controlling your decisions. Often these ghosts have familiar names: fear, guilt, self-justification, and even the illusory comfort of the comfort zone. Let's start with fear, one of the greatest internal saboteurs. It acts as an invisible barrier, preventing you from moving forward even when you know you need to change. Have you ever avoided making an important decision because you were afraid of failing? Maybe you told yourself something like, "It's not the right time," or "I'm not ready." But here is the truth. Fear will never completely disappear. The trick is not to eliminate it, but to learn to live with it and act despite it. As the Stoics taught, we must focus on what we can control, and that includes our reactions to fear. Another internal ghost that haunts us is guilt. How many times have you made a mistake and instead of learning from it, plunged into a cycle of self-criticism and regret? Guilt can be helpful if used as a guide for reflection, but when poorly managed, it turns into an emotional burden that prevents us from moving forward. Imagine yourself carrying a backpack full of stones while trying to climb a mountain. Each mistake that you insist on blaming yourself for is another stone added to the weight. Wouldn't it be better to let go of this burden and move forward lightly? Besides fear and guilt, another silent enemy is self-justification. It's easy to fall into the trap of justifying our mistakes with phrases. Imagine yourself driving a car on autopilot. You are in control, right? But actually, the vehicle follows a pre-programmed route without you really thinking about the path. This is exactly how many of our daily decisions work. We are so used to acting in certain ways that we don't even notice when we are repeating the same mistakes. These automatic habits are like small invisible traps that keep us stuck in cycles of failure. The Stoics had a clear view on this. We are responsible for our reactions and choices. If we do not question our automatic patterns, we end up being slaves to them. And here lies the big problem. Many times these habits don't even seem bad at first glance. For example, procrastination may seem harmless in the short term. After all, who hasn't left something for later thinking, "I'll do it tomorrow"? However, over time, this behavior turns into a snowball that makes any real progress difficult. So, how do we identify these sabotaging habits? The key lies in paying attention to the small daily acts that we perform without thinking. That tendency to constantly check your phone, postpone important tasks, or even avoid confronting certain emotions are clear examples of automatic behaviors that can undermine our personal growth.
The first step to changing this is simple. Start observing your actions more consciously. Ask yourself, does this take me where I want to go? Here is a practical technique inspired by Stoic teachings. Before making any important decision, take
a pause. Take a deep breath and mentally evaluate the consequences of that choice. For example, if you're about to postpone an important task, ask yourself, what happens if I do this now instead of leaving it for later? This seemingly simple exercise can help you see the impact of your actions before they become bigger problems. Another crucial point is to understand that changing habits does not happen overnight. It is a gradual process that requires patience and practice. Start with small changes. For example, if you tend to wake up late, set your alarm clock 10 minutes earlier. If you have a habit of overeating during lunch, try putting a smaller portion on your plate. Each small change helps create new behavior patterns that, over time, imagine that each mistake made is like a seed planted in the soil of your life. This seed can grow in two ways. It either becomes a tree that suffocates you with guilt and frustration, or it blossoms into a valuable lesson that strengthens your character and guides your next steps. The difference between these two scenarios depends on one thing: how you choose to interpret and deal with your mistakes. The Stoics had a powerful view on this. They did not see mistakes as definitive failures but as opportunities to adjust the course. To them, life was like navigating the open sea. Contrary winds and inevitable storms were part of the journey, but what really mattered was the navigator's ability to adjust the sails and keep the ship on the right course. Similarly, each mistake we make can be seen as a warning, a chance to correct our path before it's too late. But here is the big challenge. Often, when we make a mistake, our first reaction is to blame ourselves or try to justify it. How many times have you said something like, "I knew this was going to happen," or "I had no choice"? These phrases, although seemingly harmless, are mental traps that prevent us from learning. They keep us in a cycle of denial, where the mistake repeats because we never stop to understand what really happened. So how do we turn a mistake into a lesson? The first step is to stop seeing it as a final verdict on who you are. A mistake does not define your identity. It only reflects a specific decision or behavior. Remember what Epictetus taught. It is not the events that disturb us, but the views we take of them. If you change the way you interpret your mistakes, you will begin to see them as silent teachers who are there to guide you. Another crucial point is to practice conscious reflection after each mistake. Ask yourself, what did I do wrong? Why did I make that decision? What can I do differently next time? These simple questions may seem obvious, but few people really ask them consistently. When you dedicate yourself to analyzing your mistakes honestly, you begin to identify behavior patterns that were previously hidden. For example, you might realize that you always postpone important decisions out of fear of failure, or that you tend to avoid confronting certain emotions because they are uncomfortable. Recognize how many times have you found yourself stuck in a cycle of negative thoughts, mentally repeating phrases like, "This always happens to me," "I can never get it right," or "This situation is impossible." These stories we tell ourselves have a much greater impact than we imagine. They not only shape how we see the world, but also dictate our actions and decisions. In other words, the narrative you create about your life ends up becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. The Stoics knew this better than anyone. They understood that how we interpret events, and not the events themselves, is what truly defines our experience. If you see yourself as someone destined for failure, your choices will inevitably reflect that limiting belief. On the other hand, if you start seeing each mistake as a learning opportunity, your path can change completely. It's as if you were the screenwriter of your own life. It's up to you to decide whether you will continue writing the same story full of obstacles or create a new narrative, more empowering and aligned with personal growth. But how exactly can we change this internal narrative? The first step is to identify the stories you have been telling yourself. Ask yourself, what are the beliefs that guide my decisions? Am I defining myself by my past or by future possibilities? For example, if you always say, "I am terrible with money," this phrase may be unconsciously influencing your financial choices. Perhaps you spend impulsively or avoid investing because, deep down, you believe there's nothing you can do to change this reality. But what if, instead, you started saying, "I am learning to handle my money better"? This simple shift in perspective can open doors to new behaviors and outcomes. Another crucial point is to take responsibility for your narrative. Remember that no one else is in control of the story you tell yourself. If something went wrong, instead of blaming circumstances or other people, ask yourself, what can I learn from this, or how can I adjust my course now? This type of question transforms the mistake from an end into a means, a stepping stone on the path to something greater. Additionally, it is important to recognize that changing your narrative doesn't mean denying challenges or pretending everything is okay when it's not. It's not about adopting naive optimism, but rather facing reality with clarity and courage. How many times have you found yourself stuck in a cycle of repetitive mistakes, unable to see a way out? Perhaps you've tried changing your circumstances, blaming others, or even the universe for what's not working. However, the truth is that the biggest obstacle to personal learning and growth lies within you, and this is not a bad thing. In fact, it's great news because it means you have the power to change. The Stoics knew this for centuries. They taught us that we can't control everything that happens around us, but we can control how we react to these events. The problem arises when we ignore this responsibility and allow our automatic thought patterns, uncontrolled emotions, and limiting beliefs to take over the decisions we make. These internal barriers are invisible but extremely powerful, and they keep us stuck exactly where we are. So how do we identify these internal barriers? The first step is recognizing that they exist. Often our mind acts on autopilot, repeating behaviors and thoughts that are already deeply ingrained. For example, imagine you're driving a car and suddenly put the vehicle on autopilot. Everything seems fine for a while, but you realize that without being conscious, the car follows a route you didn't plan. This is the effect of unconscious habits. We let our actions be guided by what we've done so many times before without questioning. If we really want to continue on this path, comfort, though temporary, can become your greatest enemy. It blinds you, making you think that what you already know is enough when in reality it's holding you back. You may be so used to acting a certain way that you don't even notice it anymore. It's as if, like the car on autopilot, your mind simply follows the easiest path, avoiding any discomfort or significant change. But here's the crucial point. Change requires discomfort. The Stoics understood this very well. Change doesn't happen only when things are easy. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's when things get complicated, when you face challenges and force yourself out of your comfort zone, that you truly advance. It's not about waiting for circumstances to change, but about being the change you want to see in your life. One of the most effective ways to start overcoming these internal barriers is practicing self-observation. Constantly ask yourself, why do I keep making the same mistakes? How many times have you found yourself stuck in a cycle of self-pity or justifications, blaming everything around you for the mistakes you make? Perhaps you've said something like, I had no choice, or the circumstances forced me. But let's be honest here. Who is really in control of your life? The Stoics had a clear view on this. They understood that, while we can't control everything that happens around us, we have absolute power over how we respond to these situations. The key to breaking any cycle of repeating mistakes starts with a simple but transformative decision: taking full responsibility for your life. When you take this responsibility, you stop being a puppet in the hands of circumstances and start becoming the architect of your destiny. This means that regardless of what happens, be it financial problems, difficult relationships, or professional challenges, how you react is always a choice. And it is precisely in this choice that the power to change your trajectory lies. But how do we do this in practice? The first step is to recognize that each mistake made is actually a disguised opportunity. Remember what Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations: life is what our thoughts make of it. If you keep seeing your mistakes as definitive failures, they will continue to limit you. However, if you start viewing them as lessons, you will be taking the first step towards transformation. Additionally, it is important to practice daily reflection. Before going to sleep, take a pause and evaluate your day. Ask yourself, what did I do today that brought me closer to my goals? What could I have done differently? This simple practice can open your eyes to behavior patterns that are sabotaging your progress. By identifying these patterns, you gain the power to change them. Another crucial point is to stop waiting for the perfect moment to act. How many times have you postponed important decisions because you thought it wasn't the right time? The Stoics teach us that the right moment will never arrive on its own. It needs to be created by you. As Epictetus once said, don't wait for the ideal conditions, they will never exist. Instead of waiting for everything to be perfect, start where you are with what you have. Finally, remember that